Joining Leaders Learning from Leaders podcast today is Dr. Patrick Keeley, Superintendent of Mountain Empire Unified School District in San Diego County, California. He is the 2025 Small School Districts Association Superintendent of the Year. Prior to the superintendency, Dr. Keeley served as principal of Mountain Empire High School and in the Grossmont Union High School District. In addition to a teaching background, he has been an alternative education administrator, assistant principal, and high school dean. Welcome, Pat. We're excited to have you join us.
I'm happy to be here. Thank you for the warm introduction. So,
Well, I have to say, as I was preparing for our conversation today, I noted that you graduated from Mountain Empire High School. And so I just wanted to start off, what's that like to be superintendent where you were a student?
it's kind of a unique experience. I You never know where your career is going to take you, and I always tell people I'm just kind of like an overgrown history teacher, and I recall being in high school and having really because it's a small school. It's about 400 kid high school here, and I think being a student here, you wind up having the same teachers a couple of different times. And so
Yeah.
uh, I thought it was a really unique high school experience. And so I think it shaped how I was as a teacher and how I interacted
Mhm.
with my students along the way. And my career didn't take me here. I didn't start off working in this district. I don't, I never really, like, I moved out of these mountains at 18 years old and off to college, up in the LA area, and, kind of back to San Diego a little bit and then up to the Central Coast, and, came back and was working about, I live about 30 miles away, and I was working in that school district. And then about 10 years ago, I was ready for a change in what I was, where I was working. And, just sometimes you get that kind of vibe, right? And I was like ready to go. And um, I saw I saw the principal job at Mountain Empire High School. And I happened to, at the time, I had a different spring break than my kids and my wife, who works for a community college. So I was home alone, and I saw this job posting, and I kind of fist pumped myself. I'm like, I'm gonna go get that job, right?
I
And
love it.
I got the job as the principal of the high school. And it was a really kind of surreal thing. There were people who had children in the high school that I graduated
I'll
with,
bet. Yeah.
hadn't seen in 25 years. There were teachers here that were still, they were my teachers, and now I came back as their principal. Uh, the One of the school board members, he became a school board member, I think, maybe 6 months after I started. He was my basketball coach in high school. He was actually, the only teacher I'd invited, and was at my wedding. And now he was one of our school board members. So it was like
Very
a
cool.
really neat thing, but it's also very eye-opening, because what you realize and what you experience as a child may not that be the reality that people were living in or whatever. Like, I didn't really know. Like, it's like, that adult brain thinking back. I don't know that I realized some of the struggles that even my own friends in high school
Yeah.
had. Um, whether it be with, like, rural poverty is challenging. Access to things is challenging. And I don't know that I ever realized that for some of my friends as an 18-year-old kid. But coming back and working in the district and seeing, with my teacher lens and my educator lens, what challenges lie in that community was a very eye-opening experience. And I think it was also kind of helped me understand even parts of, my experiences in high school better. So it's a really neat thing.
Sure. I had very slight uh, connecting story in that early as I moved into being a teacher trainer and consultant after teaching, I got to do a workshop back at the high school that I graduated from, and there were still a few teachers in the audience who had been who had been my teacher.
Yeah, I think, well, I think there'll probably be some people out there that are like, I knew that guy as a kid, and there's no way he should be the superintendent. And I would agree with that. I would agree that we shouldn't be hiring 17-year-old high school students as a superintendent, but everybody grows up and learns and lives, and so it's
I,
a very unique experience for sure,
I was
especially in a
gonna
smaller district.
I was gonna say there's another important picture there in that we really don't know the future picture of the students who are sitting in our classes, and I
That is
think
100%.
we make up some pictures that get in our way, which then get in the students' way.
Yeah, when I think of just like a leadership journey and getting to this role, and I referenced the school board member who was my basketball coach. He was my ASB advisor. He was my history teacher. He was my go-to adult in high school. And then he was on the school board, and then eventually had the opportunity to hire me as a superintendent. But he was the one teacher for me who saw that. Like, we see lots of things. We see behaviors, we see their home lives. But do we ever hone in, I think, on what is like that core makeup of that person and
Yeah,
what could that lead to? And he was like my champion in that. And he even I remember years later going to his retirement party as a teacher, and when he was retiring as a teacher, and he said, he goes, of all the kids, he goes, I don't know that that I taught, he goes, I don't know that there was one that loved the high school more than Pat.
yeah,
And so he saw that in me. He saw something that a lot of people didn't, and I think that's important just from a like a teacher standpoint, an educator standpoint, is we tend to, there's a lot, right? There's a lot to being a teacher. And, like I think that we can be overwhelmed very easily by the work, right? By the day-to-day work. But that pause and that reflection of how powerful are we? How much power each of us
yeah,
brings every single day to our job and to every word we say, every interaction we have, every, like we make or break it for some people just by a phrase, and we don't know. And that's the thing. So it's like always something to try to be conscious of, and it's impossible to be 100% conscious all the time because the work is the work, and we got to get stuff done, and we have certain things to accomplish. But that pause and that reflection, like I've always thought about that. Like I had one particular teacher in my life that saw something in me that I didn't see at the time,
yeah,
that other teachers certainly did not see in me, but I had one. And whether he consciously reflected on that power or not, I don't know. But there is that power that exists in all of us in education that I think sometimes we forget. And I don't think we forget in a like intentional way. I just think the work can become overwhelming.
yeah. Can you give us kind of a snapshot of the Mountain Empire Unified School District?
Sure. Um, it is a 660 square mile area. We run along the Mexican border to the Imperial County line up into Mount Laguna. Um, and it is like that area is almost like if you were to look at the map of our school district and take the western edge of our school district and put like a hinge on it and flip it over, it would be nearly the size of most of San Diego County. Maybe not
Yeah,
North County. So it's a really massive area to navigate. But it's mountainous, and there's small little towns and small communities. Um, they're pretty far reaching. So for our elementary schools, some of them are about a 45-minute drive apart. And that's how far it is.
Mhm.
Um, so, with that, obviously rural area, there's not really a full service grocery store in our area. PBS just did a quick clip on us with their Feeding San Diego program that we're partnered with to distribute food out of one of our school sites for the community. Um, but so we have about 65 to 70% students who are on free and reduced, or what used to be called free and reduced, but socioeconomically disadvantaged, about 35% English learners. Um, that as far as student demographics, we serve 3 Native American reservations as well. So it's a very vast area. We put about 5,000 miles a week on our buses, just on the transportation alone. And so we have that unique challenge in that over 7% of our budget is just transportation in our district. Most school districts, at least in San Diego County, when I've kind of informally surveyed, are between 2 and 3% of their budget is transportation. And so things like that, force us to be creative in other ways. It also challenges us in what we can, add to the pay scale. Um, and so some of those things are kind of unique to us. Um, I think the vastness also um, is it's challenging in that here in Southern California we have what's called Santa Ana winds. So you have these wind events that happen where we have the freeway that kind of cuts off half the district or cuts through the district, and they'll shut it down for high profile vehicles. And anything beyond a 35-mile sustained wind, we can't run our buses. Uh,
Wow.
and and so then you layer that on to you're in a wildfire zone and you have public safety power shutoffs. And so we wind up having some challenging times during the school year where we can't offer school. Beyond that, because of the size of the district, we have one area where might have 70-mile-per-hour winds and another area might have 20-mile-per-hour winds, but we can't run buses, so we can't have schools. So one community that's 30 miles away from another impacted by the weather 30 miles away. So there's things like that that are like, I always tell people it's the most unique place I've ever worked.
So I saw a news clip about how your school supported the community this year during the dry weather, wind and fire and threats, and kind of connects to the comments you were just making. How do you lead a school system to be prepared for and guide those kinds of actions?
Um, that's a good question. Uh, my very first day as the principal of the high school, the first day of school, we had a flash flood. It's, beginning of the school year, summer flash flood. I had roof damage on one of our classrooms, and the classroom flooded. And but the staff didn't necessarily overreact. They kind of worked with it that I didn't see, and I've never seen anywhere else I've worked. Um, so for a couple years ago, we had um, a wildfire about 20 miles south over near, the community of Potrero, which one of our elementary schools is there. And I think it was like maybe the second week of school, and it was about 105 degrees outside. And I was standing at one of our elementary schools talking with the principal, and you could see the smoke, and you're like, uh-oh. And then the phone rings. And then it's pretty soon we got to get, kids moving and whatever else. And it happened at the end of the school day. So from that perspective, we didn't have to do an evacuation. But from about 3 o'clock or 3:30 on that day, I'm, in coordination with the sheriff's department to evacuate people to our high school. And so it's about 4 o'clock and people started showing up. And when there's an evacuation like that, it's all hands on deck for law enforcement and public safety, right? So you have Border Patrol and you have sheriff's deputies just rolling into the high school with people in their car, dropping them off, dropping their pets off, whatever possessions, all of that. And all the teachers were gone, so it was about 4 o'clock. But I had some classified staff, and they just like, well, what do you need? And as a team, people were here till 10 o'clock at night until the Red Cross got set up. It took the Red Cross a minute to get out here. And, my staff just stayed, no one saying, hey, give me overtime. No, none of that. It was people in this community needed help, and the people that were here helped. And, myself and our assistant superintendent of business, we stayed the night in our offices that night, to make sure that things were good here. But that level of, I'm going to drop what I have to do to help. Like I said, I never experienced it to that level, until I got here. And so, like I said, I think there's a natural resilience that is built into rural communities. If you live in a rural community, you know that there's not a whole lot of people that are going to show up to help right away. And so you rely on your neighbors, you rely on your friends, you rely on strangers within your community, to help and to get through whatever the crisis may be. And so when I think of that, it's something that makes me very proud to work here, and very honored to work in a community like this.
So if I'm looking at what your leadership role is, I'm hearing that you're leading a team.
I think, yeah. I mean, you're leading a team, and you're on some levels, the way our district is laid out, like each area, there's a Pine Valley planning group and a Camp Lake Marina planning group, and things like that. But from where does who sees the whole community all the time? It's the school
Yeah.
district sees the whole community all the time, because if you are in the Potrero community, you're not really thinking of Descanso on a daily, what's going on for that community. But on any given day, I'm thinking and working with any community in this mountain. And so uh, I think it's a different style of leadership, because you're trying to tie so many diverse communities into one, when their needs are vastly different.
I know that both you and the district have strong goals around students being future focused and self-directed learners. When I looked at your website, what does that commitment require from district leadership?
Um, well, it requires, kind of sticking to the plan, first of all. We wrote a portrait of a graduate with the community and had over 76,000 data points collected to make that document via surveys, interviews, um, workshops. Took over a year to write. Um, so first you gotta what is the vision? What is the community vision? What do you know? What message are you consistently sending, around how you're delivering instruction? What is the point of why kids are in school? And then from there, you also we wrote a 5-year strategic plan. So we wrote our vision, but then we wrote our plan based on the vision, but only on the systems portrait, or wrote a portrait of a graduate. And then, from there, one of the messages, like from me and from the superintendent, has to be, you have to speak in reality to people. A lot of times people will speak in goals and stay in this space of, we're going to make 3% progress here and 5% here. But there's also the reality that this is hard work, and that if you as a leader are thinking you're going to do it all in one year, I don't believe that you're speaking in reality. And so when we started this whole process, it was, I kind of started off with um, sharing when I was introducing things to the staff. I shared pictures of technology in 2007. And we talked about like this was 16 years ago. I think this was like 2023 when we finally started rolling everything out. And I was like, this was 16 years ago. The iPhone was born in like 2007, as were the kids who are seniors right now, right? So think about what jobs and what things did not exist just 18 years ago. And so my point was we have kids right now entering our system as young as 3 years old. Now it's two because we've opened two toddler preschools. Um, but we had at the time kids that were 3 years old in 2023. What is the world going to be in 15 years? We can't even begin to imagine. 2023, we weren't even talking about ChatGPT. We can't even begin to imagine the jobs that we're trying to prepare students for. I mean, if you really think about that, what, our generation there's still traditional job like that you're looking at, right? And it's go get a pension, go get, if you can get a job with a pension, great. Make sure you get that 9 to 5 or with benefits, whatever it might be. But what these children now are faced with in 15 years, 10 years, it's going to be a completely different thing. So then that's when you go back to that portrait of a graduate and you start to think about what are the attributes that people need?
Yeah.
You're not gonna even be able to attract the full amount of people with expertise into public education that is needed to learn some of these things, right? You're not going to get AI engineers into schools that are going to work full time in a school because, well, first of all, there's a lot more money to be made outside. But are you working with the kids on these attributes, whether it be being community focused, whether it be, a future focused person, or what have you? How are you going to be able to demonstrate that, and how are you putting that, that self-directed piece into it? And so, kind of before I became superintendent, I started to rework the high school graduation requirements. One of which was, when you asked earlier about coming back to being at my own school in my own district. I came back here in 2015, right? So it's 25 years after graduating. The senior year looked exactly the same, exactly the same.
The yearbook
And
looks the same, right?
I'm walking. I just was like noticing, like, well, these seniors over here, they only have a couple requirements left, and so they're on wander the halls for 2 hours, and I think about like that whole mindset of it's my senior year, I got to chill out, I got to coast. Really, that's when you're supposed to be launching, right? That's when you're supposed to be like, I got to put my foot on the gas. Adulthood is about to hit,
Yeah,
and
future focused.
and most and most often it was like, hey man, it's my senior year, I've already been through it, and it's like that's not the world anymore, right? So now we have a graduation requirement, which is a self-directed senior experience or senior project that kids have to complete and present in front of a panel um, in order to
Very
to
cool.
fulfill that requirement. And part of it, I mean, and it is self-directed. It's not something so simple. It could be like go, you want to get into firefighting. You need to get a hold of somebody at Cal Fire and go volunteer at their station. You want to, and then you need to share your experience and what you've learned and what you've learned about yourself. We had a student make a documentary about our facilities at our school district, which really helped us in our appeal to the state to access funds. So, I mean, here we had a senior in high school partnered with the Institute for Public Strategies, and it was a key component in us accessing $4.6 million in funds. And a student did that, right? We've had students who have written a children's book. We've had kids who, we had one student who developed a dissolvable paper, like a rice paper, with a serial number on it So you could, so if, I think if he developed it more with a manufacturer, it could become something great, which was to make sure that a pill is authentic in order so someone can take a pill that doesn't, um, that they know is not tampered with or not laced,
Hmm.
right? So like you give, like I always say the future is for the creators.
Yeah.
And if you really think about the way the world is headed, I think creativity, I think, giving people time to think that out of the box, straight curriculum stuff, it's not interesting to kids when, they carry around a supercomputer in their pocket and they can find information. Now, teaching about how to find information and what's the right information and what's true information. Now that's part of it, but you no longer have to just provide knowledge it's a different time. So that's kind of when when I think about the big picture and to keep telling people you're not gonna, we're thinking 15 years out. We're not thinking that we're going to take our portrait of graduate and next year all of these kids are going to automatically become that. We're really, 15 years from now is what we want. So then the school system is sustainable and growable and everything else. But more of the same isn't working for this generation. And I don't think the next one will be the same. I think it's very challenging right now.
You've kind of led me into the last question I wanted to explore with you. And I wondered if you'd label some of the current challenges that you see key to people in the superintendency and maybe especially from the small schools side and um, thoughts on how you're looking at addressing those or confronting those.
Well, um, I think the inequities in how small school districts, I can't speak to nationwide. I would imagine it's possibly similar, but I can speak to our challenges here in California when I want to say 38 out of 39 million people live in urban and suburban areas, and only about a million people live in rural areas. Um, I I don't know that there's, I think we need to be very clear from the small school district superintendency about what our needs are. We operate differently. We don't operate the same, and we don't have as many people and things like that to do certain things. But I think, so that there's that challenge. I think we have to stay firm in our advocacy for our students. Our students in rural areas are just as important as the kids that live on the coast. And I don't always think that because it's government funded, right? So where are you going to put the money? You're going to put the money where the votes are. Let's be clear. And um, so I think there's that part. But I think from the other challenge that especially in the smalls is it is very difficult to for people without roots in small communities to sometimes come work in them, to drive out to them, to live in them. I find a challenge for some of our young teachers is, you know, you're a 30 or 28-year-old person. Do you really want to live 40 miles from everything? And it might not be what you want. So finding the right people, growing your own. We've been, trying to invest in some of that kind of thing. I always tell people the solution lies in the mountain. It doesn't lie in trying to find people that live 40 miles away. And so having those conversations, I think the other challenge for superintendents, and this is probably across the board and for educators across the board, is um, we live in an Amazon Prime world, right? At your fingertips, you can get something. Last night I ordered something from Amazon. It was on my door at 6:30 a.m. this morning, right? So um, that's where society is, but this is the people business, right? And people have only so much capacity. I was just in a meeting yesterday telling a counselor and a teacher and a coordinator that were, while in a meeting, I took email off my phone. I took email off, and I said, you should too. You have, I pointed to one person, you have two daughters at home. They don't need you on your email for work at night. They need you. And so giving people that parameter of like, you still have to be a person. You're not,
Mm.
and part of the problem is there's this there's this need for instant information and things. And I think that that's taxing on people because teachers at their heart care deeply about their students and they care deeply about their work. It's very personal work. And so the what they give to people is themselves more often than anything, and sometimes to the detriment of themselves, right?
Yeah.
And so I think the challenge for a superintendent is to constantly be on message with that kind of stuff. Like, I mean, when I became the principal up here, my very first slide in my presentation of, who is this guy? Who's my new boss, right? My very first slide was a picture of my family. And I said, if you want to know what I'm about, it's right here. And you should be about yours. Because if you're not right there, if you're not right with all of that, like, you can pour everything into this and still, what do you go, what do you have outside? So like make sure all of that stuff's good. And I think part of my job is to make sure that my people are right as much as possible. It's not always going to be perfect. They're not always going to be happy with me. That's the burden of leadership, right? But my part of my job is to really try to push that and to continue to stay on message with things like that as well.
Yeah, I'm hearing the need to see in your staff the way you want them to see in their students.
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, I think I want I want for our staff to care deeply about their students. I do, but also, you have to have like, there's again that Amazon Prime world, that constant need for information and that constant need to provide information, I think is very difficult. And so I think it's important for a leader to give explicit permission to people to care about themselves too.
Yeah. Yeah. Powerful words. Powerful words. Oh, well, Pat, I just really enjoyed our conversation. I'm just a delight your your mission and vision and beliefs and values just shines through no matter what question I ask, and I appreciate that. Before we close off, what's the best way if listeners would like to follow up with you with a question or look deeper into something that you shared?
Um, I'm responsive to anything. I have a LinkedIn, you know, Patrick Keeley, uh, EDD. I think that's it. I have a Twitter. I'm not terribly active on Twitter. Twitter went south a little bit.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't even call it X. That's how south it went, right? Uh, but I mainly use Twitter to follow Padre news um, at this point. But I do have a LinkedIn that I try to post. I'm trying to be more active on LinkedIn, so you can find me on that. Um, and it is Patrick Keeley, EDD.
All right.
You can always reach out to me at Mountain Empire
You're the
Unified
district
School District, and
yeah,
my email is
on the
patrick
way.
patrick.keeley at meusd.org. And it's on the website, and you can always
Yeah.
reach out to me at the school district. Um,
Terrific.
and I'm happy to talk with anybody, share whatever insight and things like that as well.
Thank you so much.
I
Appreciate
appreciate
it.
the opportunity to talk with you.